I'm Rebecca, 32, a financial analyst in Boston who built my life on careful planning and financial responsibility. Unlike my free-spirited sister Amanda, I've always been the practical one. Last Tuesday, my phone buzzed with alerts during a client meeting. I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw it. $56,000 charged to my emergency credit card for a Paris vacation I knew nothing about. My fingers trembled as I froze the account immediately. What happened next? Complete family meltdown. Before I continue this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when everyone else thought you were wrong. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, money lessons started early in our household. My father Robert worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm, and my mother Margaret taught third grade at the local elementary school. We were comfortable, but definitely middle class. Dad would sit me down at the kitchen table every Sunday after dinner and teach me about saving, compound interest, and the dangers of debt. By 12, I had my own savings account that I proudly funded with babysitting money and birthday gifts. College was entirely my responsibility. While my parents contributed what they could, I worked weekends at the campus bookstore and summers at a local bank. I graduated with 3 scholarships and minimal student loans, which I paid off completely by 25. The day I made that final payment was one of the proudest moments of my life. Financial independence has been my cornerstone since 22, something I worked incredibly hard to achieve and maintain. But family dynamics are complicated, and in our house, there was definitely a golden child. Amanda came along 4 years after me. And from the beginning, she was treated differently. Where I was expected to save my allowance, Amanda could spend hers immediately on whatever caught her eye. When I got a B+ and was questioned about why it wasn't an A, Amanda would be celebrated for passing with a C-. Your sister just isn't academically inclined like you are, Mom would say. We need to encourage her creative spirit. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. When I was 16 and accidentally scratched Dad's car, I paid for the repair with my summer job money. When Amanda did the same thing at 16, Dad just shrugged it off. These things happen. Even holiday gifts reflected this disparity. My 18th birthday present was a practical luggage set for college. Amanda's 18th? A 2-week trip to California with 2 friends. My parents always had a justification. I was the responsible one who didn't need as much support. What they meant was that I was expected to be an adult while Amanda remained perpetually the baby of the family. After college, I followed a careful career path in finance. Starting in an entry-level position at a Boston investment firm, I put in 60-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, and built a reputation for meticulous work. My recent promotion to senior financial analyst came after 8 years of consistent performance. The salary jump allowed me to finally purchase my first condo, a modest 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. I built an emergency fund, contributed the maximum to my 401k, and maintained an excellent credit score above 830. Financial security wasn't just important to me, it was essential to my sense of self-worth. Meanwhile, Amanda's journey looked very different. She attempted college 3 times, with our parents paying full tuition each time. First was a liberal arts program she quit after 1 semester because it was too structured. Then came a photography course abandoned because the criticism was too harsh. Finally, a yoga instructor certification that she actually completed, leading to her current part-time position at an upscale studio in New York. Between these educational attempts, Amanda cycled through jobs that never lasted more than a few months. Retail positions were too demanding. Office work was soul-crushing. Customer service made her too anxious. Through it all, our parents funded her apartment in a trendy New York neighborhood, explaining that they wanted to support her dreams while she found her path. The financial emergencies became predictable. Amanda's car needed sudden repairs. Amanda's roommate moved out unexpectedly, leaving her short on rent. Amanda needed dental work not covered by insurance. Each time, my parents would cover the major expenses, but occasionally Amanda would turn to me for smaller amounts. Against my better judgment, I helped several times, with the money never being repaid. I justified it as helping my little sister, but deep down, I knew I was enabling the same patterns our parents had established. The credit card situation began innocently enough. 2 years ago, my mother needed emergency gallbladder surgery. With both parents at the hospital and me handling logistics from Boston, I added them as authorized users on my emergency credit card. This card had my highest limit but lowest interest rate, and I rarely used it except for true emergencies. The arrangement was crystal clear. The card was for medical emergencies only, and any other use required discussing with me first. For nearly 2 years, this system worked without issue. Occasionally, they would ask if they could charge a necessary home repair or an unexpected car service, always calling before making the purchase and always paying me back promptly. I had no reason to distrust them, and the convenience of having emergency access seemed worth the small risk. Just 3 weeks ago, we had a family dinner when I visited home. Amanda joined us, talking excitedly about her increasing yoga class attendance and a new boyfriend named Bradley. Not once did anyone mention Paris, travel plans, or needing funds. We ate Mom's lasagna, talked about normal family matters, and I drove back to Boston feeling like we were in a good place. How quickly things would change. It was an ordinary Tuesday at work. I had a 9 a.m. meeting with important clients to discuss portfolio allocations, and I'd prepared extensively. 20 minutes into my presentation, my phone began vibrating repeatedly in my pocket. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was a spam call. But when the vibrations continued, that familiar anxiety crept in. Something might be wrong. During a brief pause while my colleague took over the presentation, I discreetly checked my phone. My banking app showed multiple transaction alerts. My first thought was that my card information had been stolen. Credit card fraud was common, and while inconvenient, it was a straightforward problem to fix. What I saw instead froze me in place. 6 separate charges from the previous 72 hours, all from authorized users. My parents' names were clearly listed. The transactions ranged from $15,000 for first-class airline tickets to $22,000 for a luxury hotel reservation. Another $19,000 spread across high-end retailers, restaurants, and transportation services, all in Paris, France. All on my emergency card with its 30% APR. I somehow made it through the rest of the meeting, though I couldn't tell you what was discussed. My hands shook as I returned to my office and closed the door. During my lunch break, I called the bank, connecting with a representative named Allison who pulled up the complete transaction history. These charges began Sunday evening, Allison explained. The first transaction was with Air France for 2 first-class round-trip tickets from JFK to Charles de Gaulle Airport, totaling $15,200. My stomach tightened. And the others? A reservation at Hotel Plaza Athene for 7 nights in a deluxe suite, $22,400. Then multiple retail purchases, $7,000 at Louis Vuitton, $4,600 at Chanel, $3,800 at Dior. Several restaurant charges averaging $600 each, and a private car service for $2,500. Each detail felt like another punch to the gut. I asked the question I already knew the answer to, and these were all authorized user transactions? Yes, Miss Taylor. The primary cardholder was Robert Taylor, and the secondary user was Margaret Taylor. I thanked Allison and ended the call, then immediately opened Instagram. Amanda had been posting stories non-stop for the past 24 hours. There she was with Bradley at JFK, captioned "Adventure awaits." Another showed them clinking champagne glasses in what looked like a first-class cabin. The most recent updates featured them in front of the Eiffel Tower. Shopping bags from designer stores scattered at their feet. Not once did any post mention how this lavish trip was funded. My hands still shaking, I called my parents' house. Mom answered on the 4th ring, sounding cheerful. "Rebecca, how are you, sweetheart? Did you see Amanda's pictures? Isn't Paris beautiful this time of year?" The casual tone made my blood boil. "Mom, why are there $56,000 in charges on my credit card for Amanda's trip to Paris?" A pause, then, oh that. Your father and I helped Amanda with her dream trip. She's been through so much with that terrible breakup from Jared. Breakup? She just introduced us to a new boyfriend 3 weeks ago. Bradley? Oh, they've been dating for months. But the Paris trip was planned to help her recover from Jared. That was a devastating split. The breakup had happened nearly a year ago. I pressed on. Why would you charge her vacation to my credit card without asking me? Dad had apparently been listening on another extension and jumped in. Now, Rebecca, you never use that card anyway. It's just sitting there with all that available credit. Amanda really needed this trip, and we figured since you make good money now, it wouldn't be a big deal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not a big deal? You charged $56,000 without my permission. Don't be so dramatic, Mom replied. We're family. We help each other. This isn't helping, this is stealing. How do you expect this to be paid back? Dad's voice turned stern. Honestly, Rebecca, with your salary and how frugal you are, you can absorb this. Amanda doesn't have those kinds of resources. And neither do we since retirement. The conversation continued in this vein for another 10 minutes, with my parents downplaying the severity of what they'd done and implying I was overreacting. By the time I hung up, I was shaking with rage and disbelief. I couldn't focus on work. Telling my manager I had a family emergency, I left early and drove home in a daze. Once inside my condo, I called my best friend Stephanie. They did what? Stephanie's outrage was validating. That's not just unethical, Becca, it's literally credit card fraud. Even if they're authorized users, they can't just decide to spend your money without permission. I know, I said, finally letting tears fall. I just can't believe they would do this to me. $56,000, Steph. That's more than I have in my emergency fund. That's my down payment for a bigger place someday. Have you talked to Amanda? Not yet. She's probably shopping on Champs-Élysées as we speak, blissfully unaware that her magical Paris vacation is about to come crashing down. Physical symptoms of anxiety overwhelmed me. My stomach churned, my hands wouldn't stop trembling, and a pounding headache settled behind my eyes. Beyond the financial implications, the profound sense of betrayal was staggering. These were the people who were supposed to love and protect me. Yet they had violated my trust in such a fundamental way. If I couldn't trust my own family, who could I trust? After calming down slightly, I began researching my options. Credit card fraud committed by family members existed in a complicated legal and emotional territory. The charges were technically authorized since my parents were legitimate users on the account. But the amount and nature of the purchases clearly violated our agreement about emergency use only. I called my boyfriend Daniel, an attorney specializing in corporate law. While this wasn't his area of expertise, he understood the legal landscape better than most. You have a few options, he explained carefully. You could report it as fraud, which would protect you financially but could potentially lead to criminal charges against your parents. Or you could handle it as a civil matter and try to get them to repay you. Criminal charges? Against my own parents. The thought made me nauseous, despite my anger. I know it sounds extreme, but what they did is technically fraud. That said, most prosecutors are reluctant to pursue cases between family members unless there's a pattern of abuse. Daniel continued outlining my options, but the internal conflict was overwhelming. On one hand, this was a clear violation that threatened my financial security. On the other, these were my parents, and involving law enforcement felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross. The financial implications were impossible to ignore. My emergency card had a 28% APR. The minimum payment alone would be over $1,000 monthly. Even if I could afford the payments, the interest would balloon the debt to nearly double the original amount before it was paid off. This would devastate my credit score and derail my financial goals for years. That evening, I tried calling my parents again, hoping a few hours of reflection might have changed their perspective. I was wrong. Mom, Dad, I need you to understand how serious this is. This debt will take years to pay off, even if I use all my savings. Don't be so dramatic, Rebecca, Mom replied. It's just money. After all we've done for you, All the sacrifices we made for your education, you're going to make a fuss over helping your sister have one nice trip? I reminded them that I had earned scholarships and worked through college, that I had paid off my own student loans, that I had been financially independent since graduation. Dad's response was equally dismissive. Just pay it off slowly. With your income, you'll barely notice it. Amanda deserves some happiness after everything she's been through. As if on cue, my phone dinged with a text from Amanda herself. OMG, Becca. Just scored the cutest Chanel bag on Champs-Élysées. This trip is everything. Thank you for helping make it happen. Love you, sis. The message was accompanied by a selfie of Amanda holding up a shopping bag, standing in front of what looked like an expensive restaurant. My banking app immediately alerted me to another charge. $3,400 at Chanel. They were still spending, still charging, still assuming I would just absorb the costs of their extravagance. In that moment, I realized that my family saw me not as a daughter or sister, but as an ATM. A resource to be tapped whenever Amanda wanted something they couldn't or wouldn't provide themselves. The revelation was both heartbreaking and clarifying. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time misjudgment. This was a pattern of behavior that would continue as long as I allowed it. My decision crystallized. I called the bank's fraud department. I understand these are authorized users, I explained to the representative. But they're making charges that were never approved and violate our agreement. What are my options? The representative, Jessica, was sympathetic. You have several options, Miss Taylor. You can report the card stolen, which would cancel it completely. You can remove them as authorized users, which would prevent future charges but not address the existing ones. Or you can temporarily freeze the account, which stops all activity until you decide how to proceed. If I freeze it, what happens to current authorizations? Like hotel stays in progress? Any pre-authorizations already processed would be honored, but new charges would be declined. This includes things like room service, additional nights, or incidental charges. I considered this. Freezing the account would send a clear message without immediately stranding them in a foreign country. It would stop the bleeding while I figured out a longer-term solution. I'd like to freeze the account, please. Jessica walked me through the process, warning me that this would likely cause considerable disruption for the travelers. I understand, I said. A strange calm settling over me. That's actually the point. After completing the freeze, I took the next day off work. I knew the aftermath would require my full attention. Stephanie offered to come over for support, and Daniel assured me he'd be available if legal questions arose. I drafted a clear message explaining my position, ready to send once the inevitable flood of calls began. I was prepared for the fallout, but I wasn't prepared for how empowering it would feel to finally stand up for myself. The first call came at 3 a.m., just hours after I froze the card. Amanda's name flashed on my screen, waking me from a fitful sleep. "What the hell, Rebecca?" she screamed, her voice echoing as if she were in a hallway. My card just got declined at the hotel. We were adding another night and charging dinner, and the manager came over and said the card was declined. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? I sat up in bed, surprisingly calm. Actually, Amanda, it's not your card. It's mine. Whatever. Mom and Dad said it was fine. They said you knew about this. I didn't know anything about it until I saw $56,000 in charges today. No one asked my permission. There was a pause. Then her voice turned wheedling. Okay, but now you know, so can you just unfreeze it? We're in Paris, for God's sake. This is my dream trip. Bradley is freaking out. No, I won't unfreeze it. What you and Mom and Dad did was wrong. It's my credit, my financial future you're playing with. Amanda's tone shifted instantly to rage. You selfish bitch. You've always been jealous of me. I finally have something amazing happening in my life, and you can't stand it. Wait until I tell Mom and Dad what you've done. She hung up before I could respond. I checked the time. 9 p.m. in Paris. They still had plenty of evening activities planned, all of which would now be complicated by a declined credit card. I barely had time to process the conversation before my phone rang again. Mom. Rebecca and Taylor, what have you done? Her voice was shaking with anger. Your sister is stranded in Paris because of you. She's not stranded, Mom. She just can't charge any more shopping sprees to my account. How could you do this to your own sister? To your family? After everything we've done for you. The guilt trips that had worked for decades suddenly seemed transparent and manipulative. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? I worked for everything I have. This triggered 20 minutes of tearful recriminations about how I was destroying the family and always had to make everything difficult. Dad called next on a separate line, his approach more stern and authoritative. This stops now, Rebecca. You will unfreeze that card immediately. Your mother is in tears, and your sister is facing a humiliating situation abroad. Fix this, and we'll discuss your issues when they return. No, Dad. We'll discuss my issues now. You stole from me. You committed fraud. And you're acting like I'm the one who did something wrong. Stole from you? We're family. Family helps each other. Family asks first. Family respects boundaries. Family doesn't take advantage. The calls continued through the night. Text messages piled up. Voicemails accumulated. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. Then came the social media onslaught. Amanda's Instagram story featured a tearful selfie with the caption, "When your own sister sabotages your dream vacation out of jealousy. #toxic family, #stranded, #Paris." Comments from relatives and childhood friends poured in. Most took Amanda's side, having only her version of events. So sorry this is happening to you. Can't believe she would do that. Some people just can't stand to see others happy. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years texted me directly, "What's wrong with you? Why would you strand your sister in Paris?" I resisted the urge to defend myself publicly. Social media warfare would only escalate the situation and drag others into a private family matter. Instead, I muted notifications and focused on getting through the workday. At the office, my distraction was obvious. My hands shook slightly as I typed, and I kept checking my phone despite trying to ignore it. My boss, Catherine, noticed during our team meeting. "Rebecca, is everything all right? You seem off today." After the meeting, I briefly explained the situation, leaving out the more dramatic details. Catherine was surprisingly understanding. "Take whatever personal days you need to handle this. Family financial issues are incredibly stressful." I appreciated her support but worried about my professional reputation. I prided myself on separating personal and work matters. Now this family drama was spilling over into my career. Meanwhile, the crisis in Paris escalated. Amanda called again. This time slightly more subdued. The embassy said they can issue emergency funds, but it's complicated and takes time. Bradley had to put the hotel on his card, but he doesn't have enough credit for the rest of the trip. We have to cut everything short by 4 days. For a moment, I felt a twinge of guilt. Then I remembered the $56,000 already spent, the broken trust, and the complete lack of remorse from anyone involved. "I'm sorry you're facing consequences for actions you chose to take," I said calmly. "Ugh. You are unbelievable. This was supposed to be special. Bradley was going to propose at the Eiffel Tower tomorrow. Now everything is ruined, and it's your fault." The emotional manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. If Bradley was planning to propose, he probably should have paid for the trip himself instead of letting you steal from your sister. Amanda hung up again. Minutes later, she posted another update. "Having to cut my magical Paris trip short because some people can't be happy for others. #heartbroken, #dreams crushed." Through it all, my support system kept me grounded. Stephanie came over after work with takeout and wine. She stayed the night, helping me filter messages and reminding me that I wasn't the villain in this story. Daniel checked in regularly, providing both emotional support and legal perspective. "You're doing the right thing, Rebecca. It's hard, but necessary. They violated your trust in a major way." Even my coworkers stepped up, covering my projects when I needed to step away for calls. My therapist fit me in for an emergency session, helping me process the guilt and anger without being consumed by either. The most surprising escalation came when my parents tried to recruit others to their cause. They called my childhood friend Lauren, asking her to talk some sense into me. They reached out to Daniel, trying to convince him to persuade me to unfreeze the card. They even attempted to contact my bank directly, claiming a medical emergency required immediate card access. Most shocking was discovering they had tried to access my other accounts. I received a security alert that someone had attempted to log into my savings account using the password recovery option. The attempt failed, but the violation felt even deeper. They weren't just trying to maintain access to funds they'd already taken, they were actively trying to gain access to more of my money. Through each new betrayal, my resolve strengthened. What had begun as a shocking discovery was evolving into a long-overdue confrontation with toxic family patterns. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down to keep the peace. 3 days after I froze the card, Amanda and Bradley returned to the States, their trip cut short by 4 days. My parents insisted on an emergency family meeting at my apartment that evening. I agreed, believing a face-to-face conversation was necessary to resolve the situation. I prepared methodically. I printed account statements showing every charge. I calculated interest accrual projections. I researched the legal definition of credit card fraud. I even prepared a payment plan proposal. Stephanie helped me arrange my living room for the meeting, then made herself scarce, staying in my bedroom for moral support but giving us privacy. Amanda arrived first, slamming her designer purse onto my coffee table. Her eyes were red from crying or jet lag, possibly both. She immediately launched into accusations. "You've ruined everything. Do you have any idea what you've done? The hotel staff treated us like criminals. We had to BG Bradley's parents to wire money for the flight change fees." Before I could respond, my parents arrived. Mom rushed to embrace Amanda, shooting me a disappointed look. Dad stood awkwardly in the entryway, his expression a mixture of anger and discomfort. "Let's all sit down and discuss this calmly," I suggested, gesturing to the seating arrangement I'd prepared. "There's nothing to discuss," Dad said firmly. "You overreacted and embarrassed the entire family. The only question is how you're going to make this right." I took a deep breath. "I have all the account statements here. Let's review exactly what happened." For the next 20 minutes, I methodically went through each charge, starting with the airline tickets and ending with the last attempted hotel charge that had been declined. I showed them the credit card agreement I had signed, highlighting the sections about authorized users and liability. The total charge to my account without my knowledge or consent was $56,487. I concluded. At my card's APR, if I made only minimum payments, it would take over 30 years to pay off and cost over $200,000 in interest. My clinical presentation seemed to puncture some of their righteous indignation. Dad, the accountant, looked particularly uncomfortable at the interest calculation. "Now, let's talk about my annual salary," I continued, pulling out another document. "After taxes, retirement contributions, and essential expenses, my discretionary income is about $20,000 per year. This debt represents nearly 3 years of saving every spare penny I have." Mom's expression softened slightly. "We didn't realize the interest was so high. Did you ask? Did anyone bother to consider the financial impact this would have on me?" The room fell silent. I pressed on, now showing them the printout of legal definitions. "What you did constitutes credit card fraud. As authorized users, you agreed to only use this card with my explicit permission for agreed-upon purposes. By law, I could report this to the police and my credit card company as fraud." Dad's face paled. "You wouldn't do that to your own family." "I don't want to. But I need you all to understand the severity of what you've done." I then presented my ultimatum, laying out 3 non-negotiable conditions. First, I need a written payment plan with monthly contributions from all 3 of you totaling at least $1,000 per month until the debt is paid in full. Amanda started to protest, but Dad silenced her with a look. Second, I need a written acknowledgement of wrongdoing, stating that you understand what you did was unauthorized and violated our agreement. That sounds like you're asking us to confess to a crime, Mom objected. I'm asking you to take responsibility. There's a difference. And third, Dad asked, his voice notably quieter. Third, we establish clear boundaries around money going forward. No authorized users on any of my accounts. No assumptions about my financial support for anyone's wants or needs. Any requests for financial help must be explicit, with clear terms for repayment. Amanda, who had been surprisingly quiet, suddenly erupted. This is ridiculous. You're acting like we robbed a bank. Mom and Dad promised me this trip. They said it was all arranged. She turned to our parents accusingly. You said Rebecca agreed to help. You said she was happy to do this for me. An interesting crack appeared in the united front. Mom looked away guiltily while Dad cleared his throat. We may have exaggerated Rebecca's enthusiasm, he admitted. You lied to me? Amanda's voice rose higher. I never would have gone if I knew Rebecca didn't approve. Now I look like some kind of thief to my own sister. The revelation shifted the dynamic in the room. Amanda was still centered on her own victimhood, but for the first time, she acknowledged that something inappropriate had occurred. I didn't know, she said, now addressing me directly. Tears forming in her eyes. I swear, Becca. They told me you were totally fine with it, that you wanted to help with my dream trip after everything with Jared. The breakup that happened a year ago? It was really hard on me. But maybe not $56,000 hard. She wiped her eyes. I should have checked with you directly. This small admission. The first acknowledgement that anyone had done anything wrong felt like a breakthrough. My parents, seeing the shift, began to change their approach as well. Dad, always the pragmatist, turned his attention to the payment plan. $1,000 a month is steep, especially for Amanda's yoga instructor salary. I can contribute $300, he offered after examining his own finances. Your mother and I will take a loan against my 401k if necessary. Mom, still emotional but less combative, agreed to add $200 from her teacher's pension. Amanda committed to $300, though she looked panicked at the figure. And the remaining $200? I asked. We'll figure it out as a family, Dad said, a new note of humility in his voice. Perhaps Bradley could contribute, since he enjoyed the trip as well. The transformation continued as they realized I might actually follow through with reporting the fraud. The initial anger and blame gave way to the beginnings of genuine apologies. I never meant to hurt you, Rebecca, Mom said quietly. I just wanted Amanda to be happy. I didn't think about how this would affect you. That's the problem, I replied. No one thought about how it would affect me. No one considered that I'm a person with my own financial goals and boundaries. After nearly 3 hours of tense negotiation, we reached an agreement. Dad drafted a payment plan on his laptop with specific amounts and due dates. All three signed a statement acknowledging that the charges were made without my permission and violated our agreement about the card's use. And we established clear boundaries for future financial interactions. The atmosphere remained strained, but the explosive anger had subsided. Amanda surrendered several of her designer purchases for resale to help cover the debt. Dad made the first payment on the spot, transferring funds directly to my account. As they prepared to leave, the dynamic between us had shifted permanently. I maintained my emotional distance despite the resolution, knowing that trust would take much longer to rebuild than the financial damage. I hope someday you can forgive us, Mom said at the door. I hope so too, I replied honestly. But right now, I need you to respect the boundaries we've established and follow through on your commitments. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my family was seeing me clearly. Not as the responsible daughter they could count on to fix everything, but as an individual with my own needs and limits. The cost of this recognition had been steep, but perhaps necessary. The weeks following our confrontation were dedicated to financial cleanup. I spent hours on the phone with my credit card company, explaining the situation without formally reporting fraud. The representative, Martin, was surprisingly helpful. We can dispute some of the charges as unauthorized, he explained. Though with authorized users, it's complicated. But we can definitely negotiate a lower interest rate while you work through this. We set up an official payment plan with a reduced APR of 18% instead of 28%, which would save thousands over the repayment period. Amanda reluctantly sent me photos of the designer purchases she'd made, and I researched consignment options to recoup some of the costs. A Chanel bag, still with tags, sold for nearly 80% of its purchase price. 2 unworn Louboutin pairs went for 60%. Each sale reduced the principal balance, accelerating the payoff timeline. My parents, true to their word, took a loan against Dad's retirement account to make consistent payments. The formal payment plan transformed our family communication. Weekly update calls were replaced by business-like emails documenting payment confirmations and balance updates. Every discussion about money was documented, eliminating the possibility of misunderstandings or selective memory. The new boundaries initially met with resentment. Mom would make pointed comments about needing to check with the bank before making family plans. Dad would sigh heavily when I requested payment confirmations in writing. But gradually, the resentment gave way to something unexpected: respect. "You're handling this very professionally," Dad commented after receiving my monthly statement breakdown. "I've always known you were good with money, but your organization here is impressive." The personal aftermath was more challenging to navigate. I increased my therapy sessions, working through the profound sense of betrayal I still felt. My therapist helped me see patterns I'd never recognized before. "You've been the family caretaker since childhood," she pointed out. "You learned early that your worth was tied to your responsibility and reliability. That's a heavy burden for anyone, let alone a child." Working through these realizations strengthened my relationship with Daniel. He witnessed the whole ordeal without judgment, offering support without trying to fix everything. "I'm proud of you," he told me one evening. "Standing up to family is one of the hardest things to do. You did it with grace and integrity." With his encouragement, I began building stronger connections outside my family. Friendships I'd neglected while focusing on career and family obligations deepened. I joined a women's financial empowerment group, finding community with others who understood the complex intersection of money and relationships. The most surprising transformation came from my parents. About 6 weeks after the confrontation, Dad sent me an email that left me speechless. "I've been reflecting on our family dynamics," he wrote. "For years, we've placed unfair expectations on you while enabling Amanda's dependence. This situation forced me to see how deeply we've failed you both. I am truly sorry, Rebecca. Not just for the credit card incident, but for the years of treating you as the responsible one who didn't need support or recognition. You deserved better." Mom's acknowledgement came more gradually, through small comments and changed behaviors. She stopped comparing me to Amanda in our conversations. She began asking about my goals and dreams rather than just my achievements. When I mentioned stress at work, she offered sympathy instead of immediately pivoting to Amanda's latest crisis. Perhaps most significantly, they stopped financially enabling Amanda. When she called asking for rent money 2 months after Paris, they suggested she find a roommate or pick up additional teaching hours. The change clearly shocked her. Amanda's growth process was the most uneven. She alternated between entitlement and genuine remorse, often in the same conversation. But necessity proved motivating. With our parents no longer covering her shortfalls and a substantial monthly payment obligation to me, she finally committed to full-time work. She added corporate yoga classes to her schedule and began teaching private sessions to wealthy clients. Her first genuine apology came during a rare moment of self-awareness. "I never learned how to support myself because I never had to," she admitted during a phone call. "I always knew someone would bail me out. Usually you. I'm sorry I took advantage of that, Becca. I'm trying to do better." 3 months after the Paris incident, we attempted our first family dinner. The atmosphere was different from any previous gathering. My parents treated me with a new deference, carefully avoiding financial discussions unless I initiated them. Amanda seemed subdued, less performative in her stories. Most noticeably, the conversation included me as an equal participant rather than revolving around Amanda's needs and dramas. The payment plan continued without issues. Each month, the combined payments arrived on time. The designer items sold for decent returns. By the 3-month mark, nearly $12,000 had been repaid. My own internal changes were perhaps the most profound. I recognized my people-pleasing patterns and how they had contributed to the dynamic. I started practicing saying no without guilt or lengthy justifications. I established boundaries in other relationships that had previously drained me. And I began building a life based on my own values rather than seeking family approval. I feel like I'm finally becoming myself, I told my therapist. Not just the responsible one or the successful one or the reliable one. Just Rebecca. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, it felt like I was walking my own path rather than the one my family had always expected me to follow. 6 months after the fateful day I discovered the charges, I sat at my desk reviewing the latest credit card statement. The balance had decreased to $34,000. Between the regular payments and the sale of Amanda's Paris purchases, we'd made significant progress. My credit score, which had initially dropped 40 points from the high utilization, had begun to recover. The financial recovery was proceeding according to plan, but the emotional healing followed a less predictable timeline. Some days I felt genuinely at peace with what had happened and optimistic about our new family dynamic. Other days, the memory of the betrayal would surface unexpectedly, bringing fresh waves of hurt and anger. Therapy had been instrumental in my healing process. Through weekly sessions, I gained insight into childhood patterns that had shaped our family system. I recognized how my parents had unintentionally trained me to be the responsible caretaker while conditioning Amanda to expect rescue and special treatment. The roles we learn in childhood become so ingrained that they feel like our identity, my therapist explained. Breaking free requires recognizing that these roles were assigned to us, not chosen. This understanding helped me set boundaries not just around money, but in all aspects of my relationships. When a friend repeatedly canceled plans last minute, I expressed my disappointment rather than accommodating the behavior. When my boss asked me to take on additional projects without recognition, I negotiated for proper compensation. Each small act of self-advocacy strengthened my confidence. Daniel noticed the change in me. "You stand taller now," he observed one evening. "You take up more space. It suits you." Our relationship deepened through the crisis. Seeing how he supported me without judgment or pressure revealed his character in ways that everyday interactions never could. 6 months after Paris, we decided to move in together, combining our lives and our finances with clear agreements and mutual respect. The most surprising changes came from my family. My parents, particularly my father, developed a new respect for me that went beyond their previous pride in my achievements. They began to see me as an adult with valid boundaries rather than simply the reliable daughter they could count on. "I never realized how much we took you for granted," Dad admitted during a Sunday phone call. "You made independence look so easy that we forgot how hard you worked for it." Mom's transformation was more subtle, but equally significant. She stopped using emotional manipulation when I set boundaries. When I declined a family gathering because of work commitments, she accepted my decision without guilt trips or comparisons to Amanda. Amanda herself showed the most variable progress. She would demonstrate weeks of growth and accountability, then slip back into old patterns of entitlement. But even her backsliding had limits she wouldn't have recognized before. When she asked to skip a payment due to unexpected expenses, she quickly retracted the request after I firmly reminded her of our agreement. She had maintained steady employment for the first time in her adult life, working full-time at the yoga studio and building a private client base. Her relationship with Bradley had survived the Paris debacle, though with a more realistic foundation than before. He was pretty angry about the whole thing, she confessed during a rare moment of candor. But he said it was good we found out early in our relationship how my family handles money. We've had a lot of talks about finances since then. Family therapy revealed generational patterns that had influenced our parents' approach to money and parenting. Our grandmother had heavily favored our father over his sister, creating the template our parents unconsciously followed with Amanda and me. Recognizing these cycles helped reduce personal blame while still maintaining accountability for current choices. The healing process involved what my therapist called forgiveness with verification. I could forgive the past betrayal while still requiring consistent actions to rebuild trust. when old dynamics occasionally resurfaced. Like Mom suggesting I help out with a gift for Amanda's birthday, I had tools to address the backsliding directly rather than silently fuming or reluctantly complying. I'm comfortable giving what I choose to give, I told her calmly. But I won't be contributing to group gifts based on obligation. My relationship with Daniel flourished in this new environment of clear boundaries and honest communication. We discussed our own family patterns and how they might affect our future together. We planned our finances with transparency and equal input. When he proposed 6 months after we moved in together, it felt like the beginning of a partnership based on mutual respect rather than unspoken expectations. The long-term evolution of my family continued to unfold. My parents' relationship with Amanda normalized as they stopped treating her as the perpetual baby of the family. With consistent boundaries and consequences, she gradually developed greater independence and accountability. My role shifted from default caretaker to equal adult child. Holiday gatherings became more balanced, with attention and recognition distributed more evenly. Most importantly, financial discussions became open and honest rather than loaded with unspoken expectations. When Amanda needed help with a legitimate medical expense not covered by insurance, she approached the conversation differently. I know this is a big ask after everything, she said, presenting her research on costs and a proposed repayment plan. I completely understand if you say no. I've looked into payment plans with the provider too. The thoughtfulness of her approach, so different from past entitlement, made me willing to help with a modest loan, documented with clear terms that she followed precisely. Through this painful but necessary journey, I learned lessons that transformed my understanding of family and self-worth. I realized that my value was never tied to what I could provide for others. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but an act of self-love that ultimately benefited everyone. Confrontation, while uncomfortable, sometimes created the only path to genuine growth and change. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that real relationships require mutual respect and reciprocity. The discomfort of standing up for myself gradually gave way to confidence that grew stronger with each boundary honored. Looking back at the person I was before discovering those charges, I barely recognized the woman who prioritized family peace over her own well-being. The crisis that could have financially devastated me instead catalyzed a transformation that money could never buy. So what about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed major boundaries? How did you balance self-protection with family loyalty? Drop a comment below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need permission to establish their own boundaries. Remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to say no to what doesn't serve you. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And I hope my experience helps you navigate your own path to defining family on your terms.